The debate about the existence of ancient giants continues to this day. Many people refuse to believe in what they see because it simply does not add up to our knowledge of history, but more and more finds clearly prove the opposite to us. Giants have been mentioned in myth, books, and even sacred texts, and for good reason. But where have the giants gone? And who was able to build these huge cities? Let's figure it out. Most modern scientists are somehow reluctant to accept the idea that thousands of years ago, tall and colossal humans roamed the earth freely, although it is strange because no one questions the existence of Robert Pershing Woodlow, who still quietly existed in the last century. Known as the Giant of Illinois, Woodlow was the tallest man in the world. He was 2 meters and 72 centimeters tall. There are even photographs of him, and many could confirm that they knew him personally. So why did the topic of ancient giants suddenly become controversial? According to one of the fantastic hypotheses, tall people used to live on Earth, just like us, only of large sizes, who are called giants in legends. And this is due to the fact that in the past there was a completely different composition of the air, so not only people were characterized by gigantism, but also plants and animals. Depending on the composition of the air, living species adjust to more comfortable conditions. But for some reason, in the last 1,000 years, living organisms are getting smaller and smaller. If you think that this is just a fantastic version, then you can at least remember the times of the dinosaurs, when most of them were simply impressive in size. So why could not there be big plants and giant people? The main argument was and remains historical monuments, monuments of ancient architecture, because such houses were built of such huge stones that no human power can destroy them. And indeed, if you visit the ancient ruined cities live and look at the ruins of huge walls yourself, you understand that this has little to do with our civilization, but the massive gates, doors and bars stand out especially. In a way, they are characteristic of the period when architecture was just emerging, when the giants were masons and strength and safety were the main requirements. But if there were giants, then where are their cities? In 1963, 300 kilometers from Ankara in Turkey, archaeologists discovered 2 cave cities. Although, if you look at the landscape of this area, it is somewhat reminiscent of the moon, but all this is located in Turkey. There, very unusual towers were formed from hardened volcanic ash, which over time, rain and wind gave very unusual shapes. Although already in the 9th century AD, the people who lived here began to hollow out the towers from the inside. They were used as dwellings. They even arranged magnificent churches with colorful icons, but they still concealed the real sensation, and it is located in the bowels of Cappadocia. There are giant underground cities designed for many thousands of inhabitants. The passages to the underworld themselves were hidden under the houses. Here and there on the ground there are ventilation holes that lead far into the depths of the earth. According to estimates, 300,000 people can simultaneously fit in this underground complex, a considerable number, and the largest mine reaches a depth of 85 meters. I wonder why such huge underground spaces. After all, a whole underground people could fit there. But why do people hide underground? I must say that to date, 36 underground cities have been discovered in this area, and the most interesting thing is that their plans were carefully designed from a professional point of view. And people who know this area well believe that there are still many underground structures. And most importantly, all these underground cities are interconnected by some kind of tunnels. But personally, I am primarily interested in the following question. Why did people create underground cities at all? Obviously, to hide in them from the enemy. But then, what was this enemy? An enemy on the ground could easily force people out of their underground shelters by simply starving them, or even denying them access to air. As a rule, this question remains unanswered. But there are some stories about giants that can still open the very curtain of secrets. I think everyone has heard about heroes and people of incredible strength. Why do we know so little about it? At school, they tell us about the gods of Egypt and about the gods of Greece, but not about the gods of the Slavs. But the stories about giants are not only among most modern peoples, but also among small tribes that live somewhere in the Amazon jungle. For example, in Ecuador, legends are still told about giant cities that are hidden from prying eyes simply in the depths of the impenetrable Amazon. Also, these huge tools that were created for construction defy explanation. They were discovered at an excavation site in the Amazon jungle. If an ordinary person takes such a tool in his hand, then it will definitely not work to use it effectively. It looks like it was made for the hands of giants. By the way, a few words about technology. There is one place in Egypt located 15 kilometers from the Great Pyramids of Giza. Here, too, once stood 3 pyramids built in the era of the 5th dynasty. Blocks of diorite were processed here. This is a deep hard rock, even harder than granite. And in these blocks, perfectly round holes were drilled in an unknown way. Only here it is interesting with what force and what material. Indeed, in order to build such an equal hole, one needs not only strength but also knowledge of the properties of the material. Of course, people have always drilled. Starting from the Stone Age, holes were punched in faceted stones with the help of needles. However, the recess in the diorite stones was drilled with an unusual drill. People just can't drill through a diorite stone by hand with a core drill. Both the stone and the tool must be firmly fixed, and to make a hole, a special device is required that is able to give the drill sufficient pressure. And a simple rotation by hand will not achieve anything here, since the channels must be perfectly even, accurate to the millimeter. And it is quite obvious that the channels were drilled and not punched with a chisel and then polished. This proves that the people who built this may not only have been oversized but also had excellent engineering skills. Indeed, relatively recently, perhaps one of the most intriguing discoveries was made in Ethiopia, found an ancient city in the Harla region. What is surprising is that all the buildings had 4-meter ceilings, and the doorways here are about 3 meters and the window openings are 2.5 meters. And all this caused bewilderment among the researchers because 8 structures have already been excavated, but it is already clear that they were inexplicably large. At the same time, the remains of the inhabitants of the city were found in the settlement. They are of absolutely normal growth, although the problem is different. The found traces of vital activity do not belong to the builders. Their age is only 1,500 years, while the city itself was built in the 2nd millennium BC. And who were the mysterious builders? The question has not yet been solved. The British and Canadians who made the discovery are still sure that this building is not typical of people. Religious temple cultural buildings are one thing, but ordinary houses for living are quite another matter. And another evidence in favor of this version can be considered several stone tools. Their weight exceeded 60 kilograms and their age is about 4,000 years. Ordinary African men certainly could not use these hammers simply because of their huge size. And it turns out that in the 2nd millennium BC, the territory of Ethiopia could be inhabited by previously unknown species of people. And many researchers claim that even whole skeletons of people about 3.5 meters tall were discovered, but official science does not give a definite answer here. But the most interesting discovery was waiting for the miners right underground. A skeleton was discovered there, from the size of which it followed that its growth was 3 times greater than that of an ordinary person. And the main question, how could this happen? After all, direct archaeological evidence that can be found in such cities certainly speaks in favor of the existence of ancient giants, but by whom and why were they erased from the page of history?